let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed...
Good morning, APUSH. It's Mr. Lang here with another video for you guys, trying to get through World War II as quickly as possible here so that we can start reviewing periods 1 through 7 in preparation for the AP exam this year. Again, I'm hoping that that's going to be all SAQs. We'll have confirmation of that by April 3rd. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. Remember, everything in history can be broken down into three main themes as far as the College Board is concerned for AP. We have the political, the social, and the economic. For today's video, I want to get through the economic aspects of World War II. So in order to understand anything in history, we've always got to go back to the context. And the context for World War II in general is obviously going to be the Great Depression. This is incredibly relevant for the economic aspects because the Depression is a global stock market crash. The money supply is drying up. There's massive unemployment everywhere. FDR is going to be elected in 1932 in a landslide. He's going to promise a New Deal. And of course, that New Deal, we learned, is going to reinvent the way America does federalism by coming up with something called cooperative federalism. Okay, remember that is marbled cake federalism, the idea of the state and the federal governments and the local governments all working together. This even extends far into government working with individuals in maintaining economic growth or trying to restart economic growth. Very important here to note that the New Deal does not end the Great Depression. World War II is what ends the Depression. According to the AP test makers, you're going to see two reasons for this. Reason number one is something called full employment. I put it in quotes there because it's debatable whether or not you can consider people employed or not because they've been drafted. Okay, so obviously everyone has a job during wartime. The men have been drafted. Remember the CCC during the New Deal, the Civilian Conservation Corps. That original goal was to put unemployed young men to work. Nothing is better at doing that in this time period than a universal draft to send them off to fight. So who, again, in history takes the jobs that are now available? The women. Rosie the Riveter here is going to be a very important aspect of World War II, economically and again socially in another video. Another important reason that the war ends the Depression is because of nationalization. So just like in World War I, where industries are going to be taken over by the government and converted into wartime production, this is going to be used again very, very actively by FDR as president. So to understand how FDR is going to be implementing this nationalization and full employment during the war, we need to understand four important new organizations or revived organizations. The first one is in 1941. We're going to get the War Production Board. We had one before in World War I. FDR is going to revive it for World War II. The War Production Board is essentially going to come down to conversion. Take industries and start converting them for wartime production. It's initially going to be things like airline makers and shipbuilders, turning them into tank factories, plane factories, Navy, shipyards, things like that. This will grow throughout the rest of the war to include a lot of other industries, much like in World War I, where we saw the conversion of all sorts of factories. This is going to happen again in World War II. So War Production Board for conversion. The Office of Price Administration is going to be another interesting program. This one's all about controlling a lot of aspects of the economy. We're going to have ration books, and we're going to have the price controls, rent controls. The government is going to start limiting the prices that can be charged for products. This is a huge intervention into the economy. The government's actually going to be dictating prices. So that's a very important aspect of World War II economics to keep in mind. Office of Price Administration. The National War Labor Board is going to be created to promote cooperation between businesses, government, and labor unions. Again, this should sound familiar to us from the New Deal, where FDR was trying to get this sort of cooperation going. Nothing promotes cooperation more between these three groups of Americans than patriotism. Nothing is a better source of patriotism than wartime either. So World War II is going to get different unions, such as the new Congress of Industrial Organizations and the old school American Federation of Labor, two rival large unions in this time period. It's going to get them to work together with their bosses and the government. The government is taking over the employment and industries for wartime production, so they have a lot of control here. Basically, there's a deal made between the government and labor unions that's made to prevent strikes from happening. If there's a strike, it's not only unpatriotic, but it's dangerous for production. So the government is very responsive and makes businesses very responsive to the needs of labor. So something important to note here is that World War II is good for labor unions. They have a good relationship with the government now, and the government is actually backing them up again, just like under Teddy, and in many ways more so than Teddy. They are even going to nationalize industries where strikes are threatened. So the labor unions get a lot of leeway in this time period. Membership's going to boom. It's a good time to be in a union. The Office of War Mobilization is going to be all about coordination. This is going to be a much larger federal agency whose job is to monitor and manage all of these other agencies and departments. They are more of a bureaucracy aspect, more managing decisions and implementation of those decisions. It's very much a management position that's created. Very important, though, because FDR, again, much like with the New Deal, was very into reorganization of government, making things more efficient, at least theoretically. So what is it like at home if you were not drafted? What are some key economic characteristics of this time period, World War II from 1942 to 1945? Well, first thing you need to keep in mind always is there is rationing. We are going to limit the supply of products and materials. The idea here is it's patriotic to ration supplies. This is going to eventually lead to a post-war boom because we have conserved a lot of resources. People are going to start saving more money away. This will be a built-up savings accumulation that will be unleashed in the 1950s. So rationing is hugely important for war production, materials. A lot of propaganda deals with victory gardens, just like in World War I. We also have research. Now, of course, the Manhattan Project is probably the most notable research project of this time period, producing the atom bomb, which will end the war with Japan in the Pacific. But there are other important aspects created in this time period: sonar, radar, rocket engines, jets, computers, early computers. Lots of very important technological advancements come from this time period, and it's driven by a combination of government and business cooperation or coercion, depending on what side of the economic debate you're on. And that might be an SAQ dueling historians perspective you'd have to pay attention to. Is this innovation in technology from the time period due more to government involvement or free market? Who knows? We, of course, also have tax hikes. This is a perfect opportunity to implement even more progressivism because it's patriotic to do so. You're not patriotic if you're hoarding your money. And this isn't just going to be something that rich people have to do. Everyone else is going to be encouraged to buy war bonds. This is a savings note where you're giving cash to the government so they can use it for war. So very big, important things to keep in mind for the economy in World War II. Okay guys, I think that's going to do it for today. Remember, these videos are not a replacement for the textbook readings or the Google Classroom work, so reach out to me if you have questions. Either leave a comment down below, send me an email, find me on Twitter at Mr. Lang History. Make sure you're staying safe, wash your hands, enjoy this coronacation, and I'll be back with more videos to wrap up World War II and Period 7 as soon as possible.